Welcome back, MTG Joe here. Today we are going to do the weekly metagame breakdown for the historic best of 3 format. Now this weekend is two big events. We have the historic qualifier weekend, both the play-in and the actual qualifier, and we also have a historic metagame challenge this weekend. So very exciting weekend, lots of things to play. I'm going to cover a bunch of deck lists that can definitely win you games in both. We'll take a look and kind of go through. I've been playing a bunch of historic this couple of weeks. Testing out stuff. There's a bunch of videos if you're interested in like any of the mid-range Ketramos piles. We did 3 different versions. I was working on a black-white one for a while. And speaking of decks that are doing well, black-white Vampires. Not quite Ketramos in some of these versions, but the Sorin Alenda package is being played quite a bit and has a super reasonable win rate nonetheless. We're going to get the data from UntappedGG, what you see on the screen, companion tool that runs alongside Arena's client. Link for Untapped is in the video description. I'll paste all these deck lists in the video description as well, so you can copy paste to your heart's content. So we are just going to jump into it, do it really quick. So small sample sizes, but this gives you an idea of what the decks are all about. And the first deck is Boros Auras. Again, don't focus so much on the win rates. These are all decks that can win you games in the format. So the Auras deck is looking to use things like Light Pause and Core Spirit Dancer to scale, kind of tutor with out different auras situationally that are good. You have a very strong play on turn 1 of Plotting Demonic Ruckus, casting Light Pause on 2, and then you could right away tutor Sheltered by Ghosts, get pseudo protection that way. You have Shard Mage Rescue for protection, Giver of Ruins for protection, and then your package is like Sentinel's Eye for vigilance, Hammerhand for haste, Flying with Griff Spoon. You have Ethereal Armor that scales your creatures larger. You can play a one of All That Glitters if you want as another kind of effect there, and then Esper Sentinel as a tax effect. Lurrus Companion, you have Tormund's Crypt for Graveyard Hate, Lauren Escape as another protection effect, Pithing Needle for activated ability, Portable Hole, cheap removal, really good in Lurrus Mirrors, stuff like that. You have High Noon for the Lotus Field deck, Storm decks, anything like that. Mono Green Devotion, this is pretty good because you limit them to just 1 spell per turn. And then Hushbringer comes in against anything with ETBs, Mono Green Devotion, stuff of that nature. Some of the decks are actually swapping Amparaptor, just playing Hushbringer main, so it depends on what you're anticipating, what you want to hate out. We then have Mono Green Devotion. Again, don't focus so much on the win rates, just focus on the decks themselves. The Mono Green Devotion decks looking to generate huge amounts of mana. You have a bunch of 1-mana accelerants, Utopia Sprawl, Delighted Halfling, and Bird's Paradise. The big plays are Kiora, tapping in and tapping your Nykthos Shrine to Nyx. Generates you a whole bunch of mana, and you kind of storm off that way there. Usually this deck plays a 4 of Fanatic of Ronis. This one's playing a 1 of Great Henge in place. But Elish Norn doubles your ETB triggers, turns off your opponents. The Trailblazer and Kiora both draws you cards and kind of chain together. And then you have access to a Karn sideboard. So with Karn board, you have access to Graveyard Hate, Artifact Enchantment Hate, Activated Ability, Removal. You can shut off activated abilities of permanents, shut off your opponent's lands, or blow up your opponent's lands with Karn. You have 1 ring to draw a bunch of cards, Phyrexian Metamorph copy stuff, Sky Sovereign with the cool new art, just kind of situational removal, good in the mid-range mirrors. God Pharaoh's Gift as Tax, Mindslaver takes over your opponent's turn. Akroma's Memorial. If you generate a whole bunch of mana, make a big board, you can just give your team haste and kill them that turn. Platinum Angel can lock out some decks. Some decks just won't have the appropriate removal for this. You can kind of win that way. Cityscape Leveler blows up stuff. The Skull Spore Nexus, I guess if stuff dies, you kind of get tokens in place. So I guess heavy removal matchups. And Portal to Phyrexia goes over the top in these matchups here. You might want Stone of Erich. It's very good against the sacrifice decks. I would probably play that over the Skull Spore Nexus. We then go to Azorius Affinity. So blue and black have access to the artifact lands. None of the other colors have a single color. You do have the Razortide Bridge. Notable thing with these artifact lands, they can all be targeted with Fragment Reality, so keep that in mind. New card in the deck, we got Medicant Core Guidelight. You get the engines going, it scales and gets bigger, and when you have max speed, you can copy your artifacts. Your artifacts in particular, and notably this version is not playing Thoughtcast, which seems like an omission. Thoughtcast is very strong in these decks, but Thoughtcast could draw you 3 cards, or 2 cards. Thought Monitor draws you cards. You have Kappa Cannoneer that you can tap your stuff. Shadow Sphere in here to give trample to your creatures, including like Metagame. Cheap removal, you have the Foundry, Ornithopter combo. Emery can come out turn 1 potentially. Cameo flips pretty easy with the draw 2s in the deck as well as contributing to artifacts. You have Tormund's Crypt for Graveyard Hate, Haywire Might, Artifact Enchantment Hate. You're making green mana off Spire of Industry. You have Consigned to Memory, triggered abilities, as well as colorless spells. You can counter. Fragment is cheap removal, Spell Pierce is cheap disruption, Stone of Erich for any of the kind of sacrifice decks. Anything that's like a Johnny's Dying, stuff like that, think of it that way. And then it's also reasonable just as another kind of graveyard hate. Dampening Sphere in here for any deck that's looking to play multiple spells, as well as turns off Nykthos. Mystical Dispute as a cheap counter. We have Orzhov Vampires. So this deck here there's a few different ways to build it. And so there's like an Orzhov version, there's a Dimir version of the Vampires deck, there's Esper versions that are like mid-rangey Oculus that you can also just play the Sorin package if you want. But this is kind of a tweak of what's happening in Modern with Overlord of the Baelmark, kind of fueling your deck. They have Felia in the Modern versions. A lot of these decks play Dedicated Dollmaker. The difference between them is Dedicated Dollmaker can do the blink right away. Since it's an ETB, Felia needs to attack. This only targets your permanents, not your opponents. Felia could blink your opponent's tokens or reset stuff, like reset a Psychic Frog, for example, to take counters off. So there's kind of value in places there. So kind of give or take. Something I was trying out too is the Emperor of Bones. You have the Sorin to put into play a Lenda or Vein Ripper, but this gives you another angle where you can adapt these creatures, as well as being incidental graveyard hate. This plays nicely with Ketramos, which I have some versions that I can show you. Juggernaut Peddler is your hand hate, so a bunch of disruption, bunch of cheap removal. Sorin package. Witch Enchanter is really nice as a land that you can hit off of Overlord, same as Bogart Trawler, kind of mixed in. I wasn't playing these like Monumental Henge, the Hive. Some of these are, I just ended up having more kind of basics. The Mutavault hurt me more than it was benefiting just in terms of color requirements. So that was one thing there. So I was playing Urborg at one point. There's the new just Verges. I was playing those in place. More cheap removal, graveyard hate, hand hate, activated ability. With the stone is useful for exiling graveyards, or this, like I said, the sack. Surgical for combo hate, vanishing verse, flexible removal. Divine Purge, scalable removal for your opponent's cheaper threats. Hits your stuff too, but you have a lot of ETBs, so it's fine to recast. Path to Peril as another kind of sweeper for any of like the go wide Luris piles. And then there's Vona here, another vampire you can bring in the side. So this one here, vampire that can be removal. You can discard a card from your hand and you get a copy of the thing that you kill, basically the non-land permanent. The card that you may want to consider is Blood Baron of Viscopa. It's a vampire. It's got pro black and white, very good in these mirrors. Good against auras because it can block as well. So something to kind of keep in mind there. That was in my sideboard. You then have the Esper Vampires version. So again, this was just blue-black, the white being the Saint Elenda. The downside is you can't hard cast Elenda's deck, so the only way to kind of get use of it is with Sorin. But this is a Psychic Frog version. You can discard it. You have Tameo that can flip. And then Toxic Deluge is a sweeper. I tried this version as well. There's some gameplay on my YouTube. I was playing a One of Kaido over a Toxic Deluge, just to give you another kind of angle of attack with the deck. Your sideboard's just cheap counters, situationally. Stone again, Surgical for combo, Dampening Sphere for combo decks like Mono Green or Lotus Field, and Disruptor Flute is another Pithing Needle effect which is also attacks. Like I said, we have videos for all these. We were playing pretty well. The one I played the most, I'm 9-3 overall with versions of this. But looking at mine, very similar. We have a couple of Ketramos in here. Ghost Vacuum over Relic of Progenitus, since we do want to use our own graveyard and Relic can hit ours. I also think the targeting effect is better than Relic, which is just hitting a general thing. Viconia can be more graveyard hate that plays with Ketramos, and then it can be reanimation. I went with Felia here, just another play at instant speed. You can reset your Emperor Bones, stuff like that. Gives you that angle of attack. And then Deafening Silence for the Storm style decks. You can play High Noon as well, but similar idea. Portable Host, more cheap removal that can hit various like Pithing Needle style effects if it's like your Sorin being named. A lot of the same cards we see here. Toxic Deluge is my sweeper of choice since it scales, and then Blood Baron in the side. But there's also, like, if you're interested, these are all on my YouTube with videos. There's the Oculus Esper version with like an Earth and Ketramos kind of package. Then there's also the Emperor of Bones cheat out Ulamog with haste and annihilate their board version of the deck. So those are all kind of ideas you can take a look at. Then go to Mardu Sacrifice. So this deck here is basically nickeling and diming your opponent. It's an aristocrat style deck. So you have Goblin Bombardment with the Johnny package. You have the Amped Raptor that can help you find in your pieces. You drain like Blood Artist effect with Marionette Apprentice. Card Advantage with Village Rites. And then just Guide of Souls gains you life, gives you evasion. Clockwork Percussionist card advantage. Goblin Trapfinders card advantage. And some removal mixed in. More cheap removal, hand hate, cheap removal, graveyard hate, sacrifice hate for the mirror, Rite of Oblivion's flexible removal, you don't care about sacrificing, it's kind of in your theme, and then Thoughtseize for more hand hate. Izzet Wizards, so this one here is using the Chorus package. So you have Hymn to the Ages, which as well as Ribald Shanty, they both have starting intensity. And then every time you cast a chorus, all the choruses in your hand, graveyard, library, all increase their intensity. So the first time you cast Ribald Shanty deals 2 damage. Then it deals 3, 4, and they work with each other. So Hymn to Ages starts drawing, 1 card first, then 2, then 3, then 4. Plays really nicely with Dreadhorde Arcanist to get back. And then you're just the aggressive Wizard Shell, Symmetry Sage, Balemore, Slickshot Show Off, Flame of Anor, card advantage, scalable removal. I was playing some versions with some Snapcasters in here. Plays nicely with the hymns as well. You have Into the Flood Mob, Bounce that can scale and hit other non-land permanents. Lithomantic Barrage can hit auras, gets through Shelter by Ghosts, stuff of that nature. Pithing Needle for activated abilities. You have Spell Pierce for cheap disruption, Stern Scolding for like the Lurrus piles, Stone, and Surgical like mentioned. We have Jeskai Stifle or Jeskai Lotus. So this is a non-combo version in the context you're not using Lotus Field as like a tap and tap, but you're using Strict Proctor to stop the Lotus Field from forcing you to sacrifice. You also have Stifle effects and Consign to Memory and Stifle to trigger it. And then with the canceling ETBs, Null Drifter draws you the cards without being sacrificed. You have Flage that just stays in play, so you get some value there. One Ring to kind of grind out games, and Teferi. So it's a Jeskai control deck that shuts off ETBs and activated abilities. A whole bunch of cheap removals, some counters mixed in. You have Surgicals in here for Graveyard Hate, Dovin's Veto, Test of Talent. So just cheap counters, Wrath of Sky, flexible removal that can also hit stuff like Goblin Bombardment and non-land permanents. Invert Polarity kind of for the mid-range mirrors, you steal their big plays. Temporary Lockdown for the go-wide decks also hits stuff like Bombardment. And then in kind of the mid-range battles, the heavy removal battles, you have Tajik. Now, a lot more removal is becoming exile-based, but this is still very good in a lot of matchups that are just using like traditional sweepers, go for the throat style effects. Boros Energy, so not quite the modern powerhouse. This one's a little bit dated of a version. I wouldn't play the Sun Cleanser's main. This was more of a time when you were kind of beating the mirror. So I'm just going to trim these. You should just play the full Goblin Bombardment, so I'll make that change. And then this one's playing the Jingantha version, so you have Flage as well as some Fables in here. Bunch of ways to kind of take advantage of energy, but Ajani, very strong with Goblin Bombardment, takes over the game. You have the nerf to Ocelote's Pride, which is still pretty powerful in the deck, but a little bit more mid-rangey version. You have Amulet for some card advantage here. Fragment as flexible removal, Stones, Graveyard Hate, Combo Hate, Destroy Evil, destroys enchantments and bigger things, and then Invasion for kind of the combo. You see your Thoughtseize style effect in these colors. We already did Mono Green Devotion, so then we have Lotus Field. So Green Wires, consistently very high mythic. They're in the 20s right now, 2030s. They're 22 and 3 with this list. So this is the combo version. So you're using Lotus Field, you have the Stifle effects, Consign to Memory to shut it off, but basically what you're trying to set up is an Artist Talent out. Deserted Temple can also untap your Lotus Field, and then using a bunch of untap and tap effects. So Generate the Mana, Hidden Strings untaps it, Vizier untaps it, pour over the pages, untaps it. You're just going to keep churning through your deck, drawing, discarding, looting, and then you cast Underworld Breach to recast all these spells over and over again. You'll eventually wish to your sideboard, and then you can either use Tendrils of Agony, you can use Jace Wielder of Mysteries to win the game. You can use Mind's Desire for kind of more card advantage if you don't have enough gas. Kind of gets you going again in terms of the engine. So that's kind of the plan there. So you win by just tendriling or drawing out your whole deck. And then your sideboard's got Graveyard Hate, anti kind of hate, peace hate with Into the Flood Maw, Spell Pierce, Spell Snare, Cheap Disruption. Cameo can be used against like the Go Wide decks as a way to slow them down a bit. Like Energy makes a bunch of 1/1s. You can slow that down. Tome Scour. I guess you can mill out your opponent here. So if they kind of prevent you from doing stuff, I would assume so. You can also mill yourself, but I think this one's just gives you an alternative win condition where you can just keep with Breach, Underworld, scouring your opponent to death, I would assume. And then the defense grid against the heavy counterspell interaction decks, Brotherhood's End is a sweeper that can also take out artifact hate. And then finally, we have Yawgmoth. So current #1 mythic is with Yawgmoth. So this deck here, this one isn't the #1 player, but the list is fairly similar, gives you a similar idea. This one is from Diomeds, they're 3617. But you have Yawgmoth with kind of the Convoke package to get value. Ropeline Attendant makes you a bunch of extra creatures. Young Wolf targeting themselves. With Yawgmoth, you can create loops of like enter the battlefield, die with the Viziers. You kind of kill all your opponent's creatures, draw a bunch of cards, drain them out with Blood Artist or Marionette Apprentice. Knight Errant helps you kind of draw some extra cards. Amara is another good Convoke threat in here. Sideboard, Artifact and Enchantment Hate, Fatal Push for cheap removal along with Abrupt Decay. Abrupt Decay is really good because it gets around Sheltered by Ghosts in the Auras. Jet Collector for the grindier matchups lets you reanimate. Jarina can make your creature, so it exiles Graveyard, which is nice. You can tutor it at instant speed with like Quarter Calling, and then it makes your humans indestructible, most notably your Yawgmoth, so protection there. Hand Hate and Juggernaut Peddler, activated abilities in Phyrexian Revoker, Graveyard Hate and Scavenging Ooze, and another indestructible protection with Selfless Spirit. A lot of these will be creature-based permanents since you have Quarter Calling to tutor. So that's it. Good luck for those playing. If you get 7-0 in the events or you do good in the metagame challenge or the qualifier weekend, drop your list for others to take advantage of. Thanks for watching, everyone. Hope you have a great one and stay safe.